Ink Master premiered in 2012 at the height of the show's about tattoos craze. The premise of the show is pretty simple. A bunch of tattoo artists compete to see who's the best overall artist. The last artist standing will be crowned, wait for it, the Ink Master, and win a cash prize. While the popular show has made it through plenty of seasons and 2 spin-offs, it may not be exactly what it seems. Reality TV has a reputation for not being all that real, and it looks like Ink Master is no different. Down to the wire? For an elimination challenge, artists may be given 6 hours to do their work. According to Redditor Corey Matcham, a tattooed participant on the show, the time limit is actually pretty meaningless. On the show, Judge Dave Navarro appears to give warnings of how much time is left, but Corey said that's all done in editing to present a false sense of urgency.
That's it. Time is up. Sharpie's down.
In his experience, some artists were finished hours in advance, while other artists even went overtime. Redditor Tattooed Mom similarly claimed in an AMA that on her season, Dave Navarro's timed warnings were all filmed at one time and edited into the show after the fact. Human Canvas Jury. A big part of the elimination process is choosing a handful of the worst tattoos that have to go head-to-head before the judges. In many seasons, this is in part accomplished with the help of the Human Canvas Jury, which is made up of the newly tattooed participants.
You're here because the Human Canvas Jury determined that you had the worst tattoo of the day.
Corey Matcham was on a jury twice, and he explained in his Reddit AMA it was all fake. He says they did discuss as a group what they all thought of the tattoos, but producers only included the things they had told the jury to say. Corey claims his jury actually picked an entirely different tattoo than the one that made it to air, but the show was edited to make it look otherwise. Uninvolved judges. The show does a good job of showing how the judges regularly go from studio to studio checking out all the progress. But according to Corey Matcham, that's totally staged too. He claims the judges are actually barely on set at all, and that they came in for about 5 minutes to do the walkthrough on camera. In the end, this gets edited to look like the 3 judges were in the room the whole time. Redditor Jay Dizzle, a Human Canvas on a different season, adds that some of the judges seem to make things up on the fly, not really sticking to any standards or guidelines when it comes to judging. Not about the art? For a show that's supposed to be focused on tattoo artistry, there's a lot of time spent on weird flash challenges that don't reflect realistic tattoo scenarios. The flash challenge can be anything from ice sculpting to burning objects with live electrical wires. Season 3 artist Frank McManus was required to tattoo an inmate in a prison cell with 1 needle and extremely poor lighting. With limited resources and equipment, he felt there was no way he could produce work to the best of his ability, nor could anyone else. As he told Penn Live, the challenges don't have much to do with what tattooing really is. To make things worse, some challenges are physically daunting. Season 1 artist Heather Sin told LA Weekly that between tattooing pig corpses in a freezing meat locker and getting sunburned while working on a car, the show was more like Fear Factor than anything else. She acknowledges that she was probably too sensitive for the show, but also should have known it was never really going to be about art. All part of the plan. One of the biggest charges against any reality show is that it's all plotted out ahead of time, and based on what past contestants have said, Ink Master is exactly that. During an NBC interview, artist Kyle Dunbar said that one of the hardest things for him to deal with on the show was watching the judges play favorites, praising a tattoo with noticeable flaws from an artist they liked, while simultaneously critiquing the same flaws from a different artist. Corey Matcham noted that many shots are just flat out staged, and contestants are instructed beforehand how they need to act and react. For example, human canvases are given headphones, but the producers actually just stick them on long enough to get a shot on camera because the headphones are made by a sponsor. Apparently, the team behind Ink Master also tried to make the show seem a little saltier than it actually was. Heather Sin told LA Weekly that a producer told the contestants that if they wanted to go to sleep, they better start talking about each other on camera because nothing they were actually talking about was going to make it to air.
Hosted by Joe Rogan, Fear Factor was a game show involving contestants doing the grossest and scariest things possible, all for a shot at $50,000. Over 9 seasons beginning in 2001, the show subjected contestants to every horrible thing imaginable, and some unimaginable. Here's a look at the untold truth of Fear Factor. It was canceled twice. The television gods hate Fear Factor so much, they canceled it not once, but twice. Now, there were a lot of reasons the show could have been canceled, including the fact that it probably should never have been approved in the first place. But in 2006, the original run ended for the most boring of reasons: low ratings. In 2011, though, NBC decided to revive the show for reasons known only to them. Only 8 episodes were aired, and a 9th was pulled due to objectionable content, leading the show to be canceled again. Thank goodness that's behind us, right? Oh, wait. Third time is not the charm. It's pretty rare for a show to get a third chance at life, but MTV decided to give Fear Factor another chance, relaunching the series in 2017. Fittingly, they chose rapper Ludacris as host. There are a few changes to the new Fear Factor, though, as it focuses less on eating disgusting stuff and more on stunts that help people overcome their real-life fears. As an MTV statement put it, the show is custom created for a generation that is increasingly empowered, while also more anxious than ever. That translates to challenges where contestants must sit in an electric chair, get covered in snakes, or face their fear of drowning. Fear Factor Unleashed. Yes, a show about people doing daring activities in real life became a terrible video game for the Game Boy Advance called Fear Factor Unleashed. Needless to say, it received terrible reviews, thanks to boring mini-games that were designed to only appeal to the show's hardest of hardcore fans, whoever they are.
Yeah, that's the way you do it.
Universal Studios has a live version. Ever watch Fear Factor and lamented you weren't the one eating spiders or being drowned in a tank? Well then head on down to Universal Studios in Orlando, where Fear Factor Live is ready to test your courage. Yes, in this live show, several parkgoers are brought on stage to compete in legitimate Fear Factor-style games starring creepy crawlies and vertigo-inducing heights. It's so intense, participants have to sign a liability waiver. But don't worry, if you aren't picked, you may still be able to do disgusting stuff like eat bugs for prizes in a pre-show challenge. Hooray! Everyone's a loser. If there's one thing worse than being subjected to all the gross and scary stuff on Fear Factor, it's doing it all for nothing. That's what happened in one Season 5 episode, where every single team on the show failed the final challenge, meaning nobody actually won the grand prize of $50,000. It's true that one team did win a pair of new Mazdas as a consolation prize, but since they didn't get any money, they probably had to pay for the taxes themselves. Ouch. Gag reflex. It might seem like the show was trying to kill contestants by making them eat just the right combination of raw spider, alligator eyeballs, and bull testicles. According to producers, though, everything on Fear Factor was a culinary delicacy that had been cleared by the show's resident doctors. In fact, believe it or not, everything eaten by contestants on the original run of Fear Factor was 100% USDA certified. Whew, what a relief.
The Discovery Channel might seem like a beacon of hope and truth-telling for people sick of all the reality TV and lies out there today, until you actually look at Discovery's programming. The Discovery Channel has lied right to your face more times than they'd probably like us to admit for them. The Megalodon, a hulking shark beast that could grow 60 feet long and had the bite of a Tyrannosaurus Rex, is the monster that will never die. Except it did die millions of years ago, and the Discovery Channel keeps trying to bring this extinct creature back to life. In 2013, Discovery kicked off their mega-popular Shark Week event with a special titled Megalodon, The Monster Shark Lives, a mockumentary pretending that the giant toothy zombie fish was eating people off the coast of South Africa. Though the program did contain a shady warning about dramatized events, CNN reported that huge ratings were followed by a furious public outcry, with many arguing that the fake documentary had damaged the credibility of Shark Week as a whole.
An extraordinary claim demands extraordinary evidence.
Despite a severe lack of extraordinary evidence, or any evidence at all, Discovery continued this less than factual tradition the next year with an equally phony sequel, until finally cutting it out in 2016. Presumably, the scraps were fed to the sharks. Aquatic apes are not a thing. They were never a thing. Aquatic apes are 100% not real, and mermaids didn't evolve from them because, again, they never existed. Unfortunately, mermaids only work in the world of fantasy, which is why the 2012 fake documentary Mermaids: The Body Found, which aired on Discovery's Animal Planet, caused such an uproar. Both Discovery and Animal Planet are known for educational programming, not hoaxes, so sneaking in a fake documentary which claimed that mermaids were real creatures covered up by the US government is incredibly damaging to the institutions of science, facts, and society as a whole.
We want 100% proof because you want 100% $1 million.
Snopes debunked the whole mermaid thing after the program aired, but the scam was quite convincing to some, with the so-called documentary featuring elaborate CGI sequences and interviews with experts who turned out to be actors. There's nothing wrong with using the documentary format to create compelling fictional narratives using video passed off as found footage, as films like The Blair Witch Project and the original Cloverfield have proven, but it's extremely important to make these intentions clear from the outset so casual viewers aren't misled into thinking mermaids evolved from water apes. Bear Grylls is one rugged dude. If you watched his Discovery TV program Man vs. Wild, you were amazed to see him survive through crazy weather conditions, animal attacks, and a diet of giant larvae and bugs. Not to mention sleeping outside in harsh natural environments. Yikes. But according to The Telegraph, when filming wrapped for any given day, Grylls actually spent the night in luxury hotels. Didn't see that on TV. As the New York Times explains, some of the woodland terrains Grylls was forced to endure included a resort advertised as a cozy getaway for families with such life-threatening hazards as a hot tub, a stone fireplace, a television, and internet access. Scary stuff, huh? However, to Grylls' credit, he did apologize for all this fakery and promised to do better by his viewers in the future. Hey, remember when a giant snake swallowed John Voight whole in the 1997 thriller Anaconda? Have you ever wanted to see the same thing happen to somebody in real life? If you answered yes to that question, it's probably a good time for a little introspection. However, it seems the Discovery Channel was listening to your deepest, darkest desires because in 2014, they started making a huge marketing push for their special, Eaten Alive, claiming the program would feature a guy named Paul Rosalie being, eaten alive by an anaconda. But old Paul wasn't planning to die. He was outfitted with a special high-tech anaconda-proof suit.
I want to do something that's just going to grab people's attention.
Unfortunately for Discovery, and those who watched the stunt, Rosalie's attempt at getting eaten alive seriously backfired. After having the show's marketing pushed down their throats for months, anyone who tuned in had to sit through 2 hours of highly staged material, culminating in Rosalie getting constricted, almost having his arms broken, and then tapping out. Good for him and good for the poor tormented anaconda, but the whole thing makes you wonder what happened to the person who greenlit this ridiculous idea in the first place. It's hard to say why a show about illegal street racing is on the Discovery Channel to begin with. Still, the show Street Outlaws purports to document real, unlawful, dangerous street races in Oklahoma City. Actual street racing is a remarkably irresponsible activity, totally different from the fantasy scenarios in the Fast and Furious movies. Drivers can be seriously injured, bystanders can be killed, and property can be ruined, which is why the National Hot Rod Association threatened to revoke the license of anyone who appeared on the show. So how can Discovery film the series without getting in trouble with law enforcement? Well, because law enforcement is in cahoots with the show, of course. According to Oklahoma's News 9, Street Outlaws was caught employing police officers to shut down stretches of road so they could film their racing scenes. And we're not just talking about tiny neighborhoods either. The cops shut down an entire section of State Highway 81 in Union City just so that a ridiculous little TV show about supposedly illegal races could legally film those races. The highway was blocked off for 10 hours for the price of a whopping $25.
Get that money, boy!
Ever since Jonathan Davis was a kid, he dreamed of one day appearing on Shark Week. He went on to become a notable marine biologist and was understandably jazzed when Discovery asked him to be a part of their program. Little did he know that he was about to get royally screwed over. The first sign that something fishy was going on came when the crew filmed Davis's team pulling sharks out of the water and tagging them for actual scientific research, and a producer asked Davis to let the shark bite him for ratings. Davis refused, but the suspicious antics didn't end there. According to Gizmodo, the film crew repeatedly refused to answer Davis's questions about how the footage would be used. Finally, at the end of the shoot, Davis was asked if he believed in old stories of a mystical voodoo shark called the Rookin', which allegedly prowls the Louisiana bayous.
An alligator?
No. Shark.
Being a scientist, Davis laughed this off. However, months later, Davis had the not-so-happy realization that his footage was being featured on a TV program titled Voodoo Shark, with his interview edited to make him look like a die-hard Rookin' believer, racing against a team of bayou fishermen to catch the storied voodoo shark.
This ain't no story. This is for real.
It should be obvious that the so-called reality program Amish Mafia is faker than fake, considering that the whole idea of a group of dedicated Amish people signing up to be followed by TV cameras is wildly against their entire belief system. But just how artificial is the series?
It's 100% legit, like it's 100% real, like a lot of people got help from the Amish Mafia.
Yeah, we're not so sure about all that. While the credits do warn of select reenactments, the series never says which sequences are supposedly true, which is fairly suspicious. As Snopes points out, it's entirely possible that everything on the series is staged. Also, it seems pretty ridiculous to imagine that anyone would so openly break the law on a TV program as the Amish Mafia folks do in the show by doing things like shooting out car windows, breaking into houses, and smashing milk bottles. If you want a more realistic look at Amish life without ludicrous staged reenactments, drive down to Pennsylvania and meet some Amish folk in real life. Or maybe just turn on PBS. A 2008 episode of Discovery's Deadliest Catch contains a frightening sequence in which an Alaskan crab fishing boat named the Wizard is forced to fight through nightmarish storm conditions. Giant waves crash over the deck. Water floods the inside of the boat. Will the Wizard's crew survive this perfect storm?
And get ready to hold your breath.
Spoiler alert, they did survive, but not without a little controversy. Though the Wizard certainly made it through some big waves, The Hollywood Reporter brought some problems with the show's narrative to light. For example, the scenes of the boat flooding were shot in September while the storm waves didn't actually hit until October. These mismatched dates meant that unrelated events were cut together to make a more perilous scene. Cry creative license all you want, but if you don't tell your audience that you are using said creative license, you end up looking pretty deceptive when your program is marketed as a documentary show. Alaskan bush people might portray its stars as living rugged, old-fashioned lives in the desolate wild north, far away from the contemporary world, but this isn't exactly the whole truth. Alaska's famous wilderness does make it possible to live far away from other people, but the Brown family lives closer to civilization than the show would have you believe. The Anchorage Daily News reported that the Browns' oh-so-secluded residence was only a dirt trail away from the highway and a half-mile from a pizza place. The nearest neighbor was apparently so close to the family's house that he got insanely frustrated with all the noise and hoopla surrounding filming and tried to shoo production helicopters away by shooting fireworks into the sky.
I love the howl to me.
Yeah, I like to hear the...
They electrify.
Another deep cut to the show's authenticity is that the entire backstory of the Brown family's old house being burned down by the government is highly dubious, according to Channel Guide magazine. Notice that important details like whether the family actually lived there or whether the cabin actually went down in flames were severely underreported. Quick, sound the alarm! Yet another reality show that's sadly lacking in reality, Gold Rush supposedly chronicles the day-to-day lives of professional gold mining families. Fair enough, but actual day-to-day life is far less scripted than what you'll see on this show. Former Gold Rush Alaska cast member Jimmy Dorsey has come out and admitted that the show is planned, scripted, and directed from the beginning, with certain cast members intentionally acting out to create dramatic situations. Dorsey revealed that even his big exit from the show was arranged by producers who steered him out through careful manipulation of events.
Hey, you shut up and get out of my cabin. Now. Get out of the cabin. For it.
Dorsey also said the editors cut about 90% of the positive interactions and events captured during filming, but that's not exactly a surprise. Friendly, pleasant conversations don't make for entertaining TV or cliffhanger commercial breaks, even if they are more realistic.
If you're going to be lost in the wilderness, you probably don't want Bear Grylls with you. The Man vs. Wild host has built a brand of survivalist techniques in TV shows. His tips make for decent TV, but his survival advice, they're kind of terrible. Here's the worst advice Bear Grylls has given. There's a reason why the FDA says you should cook meat at a safe minimum internal temperature. It's because raw meat can make you sick. Sure, you've seen Bear Grylls eat raw meat on TV, but you don't know what was happening to him gastrointestinally a couple of days later, and that's reason enough for caution. It might be tempting to think that bacteria like Salmonella and E. coli are mostly just a problem in overcrowded factory farming conditions, but the Illinois Department of Public Health says those dangerous microbes can also be found in wild game. And if the vomiting and explosive diarrhea doesn't finish you off when you're out there without access to clean water and a toilet, the parasites probably will. So you're out hiking one day, you turn a corner, and there's a bear standing in the trail. You have two options. Do you A, remain calm, keep quiet, and wait for it to move away, or B, throw food at it? We're going to guess that you would probably lean toward option A, but that's not what Grylls would recommend. Grylls' reasoning was that throwing a pack full of food at the bear would create a distraction. The bear will check out the pack and you'll be able to make your escape. But when you throw food at a bear, you've just let him know that you are a willing source of food. That's maybe not what you want. According to the Roanoke Appalachian Trail Club, many bears are wary of people and will probably move away on their own. An aggressive bear may require active deterrence, so stamping your feet, waving sticks around, and making yourself look big can be effective, but your best defense is to carry bear spray whenever you are in bear country. The Colorado Parks and Wildlife Organization says it best.
Convince the bear that you are not worth the trouble. Black bears are naturally shy and retiring, and even a sow with cubs will most likely retreat when confronted.
Don't throw your food-filled pack at the bear because that's just stupid. Bear Grylls sometimes picks up a leech or two. It happens when you're swimming around in jungle waters and when you deliberately put leeches on yourself so you can gross out your audience. In one episode of Man vs. Wild, Grylls falls in a river in Borneo. After surfacing, he finds a leech stuck to his midriff and gives the audience some truly bad advice.
Best thing to do is grab him by the head and then twist him off.
But Borneo Eco Tours says that's a terrible idea because when you pull on a leech, it might regurgitate into your open wound. Leech vomit in an open wound is generally considered bad and can cause much bigger problems than just having a leech attached to you. So what should you do if you do happen to find yourself covered with leeches? Either put up with it for the 20 minutes or so the leech needs to fill up, or use your fingernail to gently push the leech's sucker until it detaches. Once you've detached the oral sucker, you'll need to also detach the posterior sucker at the fat end of the leech. Then you can throw it back into the river while shrieking in horror. Bear Grylls does a lot of terrifying things, but this one is probably the worst. The mere thought that you could one day get lost in the wilderness and have to drink your own urine to survive is enough to make a lot of people want to give up on nature forever. The first time Grylls did this, he was running short on water in the Australian wilderness.
It may seem disgusting, but your own urine is safe to drink.
So, is he right? If so, everyone who has ever died of thirst is a sucker because they had a perfectly good source of water and didn't even know it. According to Slate, Grylls is only sort of right. Provided you're healthy, your urine is sterile and about 95% water. But the other 5% is the part you have to worry about. There's also nitrogen, calcium, and potassium in your urine, which is the stuff your kidneys were trying to get rid of in the first place. So if you drink your urine once, you're probably fine. But if you keep doing it, those waste products will become concentrated, forcing your kidneys into overdrive. After a few days, your kidneys will probably fail and you'll die. You may have heard that following a stream is a good basic plan for finding your way out of the wilderness. But the trouble with following streams is that they don't always meander gently along until they finally arrive at civilization. Sometimes they plummet over a pile of rocks into a pool 10 feet below. In an episode of Bear Grylls' Escape from Hell, Grylls is reenacting a scenario in which a lost hiker climbs down a waterfall. He uses what appears to be a tree root to get close to the pool below, and then he jumps. Now, it's worth remembering that Grylls almost certainly knew how deep that pool was, but he didn't actually say that either he or his producers had already walked down to it from the safe side and checked it out, which could give impressionable viewers the idea that jumping blindly into a pool at the bottom of a waterfall is no big deal. But there's more than just pool depth to consider. As North Carolina State Parks points out, the rocks around a waterfall are usually more slippery than they look, so for goodness sake, just go around the waterfall. Maybe you'll add 10 or 20 minutes onto your ordeal, but you also won't break every bone in your body and die from hypothermia. Besides questionable survival techniques, Bear Grylls is also known for building things out of random objects that he happens to find in the wilderness. Not that we doubt the reality of his reality show or anything, but sometimes Bear's finds do seem a little suspicious. Like that time he found the wreckage of a hang glider in the desert and used it to build some weird parachute-powered car. The wreckage did not look like it had been out there in the desert for more than an hour or two, which makes us seriously doubt the accuracy of Bear's show. Then there was the time Grylls scavenged electrical wire from a downed utility pole and used it to make a rope. Now, anyone with a brain understands that you don't approach downed power lines, and you certainly don't try to salvage wire from them. Because even if they look like they're not electrified, you really have no way of knowing that until you touch them. And you really shouldn't be touching downed wires at all. In another of Grylls' most memorable moments, he disembowels a dead camel and then climbs inside the carcass. He doesn't sleep in the camel or anything, but he does tell his audience that a disemboweled camel is a great place to shelter during a sandstorm. Never mind that it takes hours to disembowel a camel, so it's not like it's a speedy solution to an incoming sandstorm. Weirdly, we were unable to locate any scientific studies on the advisability of sheltering inside dead animals. We're going to guess that the fresher your disemboweled camel is, the better. Beyond that, though, you're not Luke Skywalker, and there's no chance you're ever going to get a starring role in The Empire Strikes Back, so you can just cross that one off the list. Also, wild animals are attracted to dead carcasses, so you really don't want to be inside one when the jackals show up. Finally, animal carcasses that have been baking for hours in the hot sun are full of bacteria and other things that can make you sick, especially if you happen to somehow touch any of the dead, decomposing parts of the camel as you're climbing inside. One time, Bear Grylls ate a camel spider. Now, from an anthropological perspective, eating large spiders isn't really that strange. There are people in South America who regularly eat tarantulas, and some even use tarantula fangs as handy little toothpicks at the end of the meal. So maybe that's why Bear Grylls decided it wasn't just shocking enough to simply eat a live spider.
I'm not particularly looking forward to eating this one, but it's going to be good.
First, the spider he ate wasn't technically a spider at all, but a camel spider. Camel spiders are selpugids, so they sort of look like a cross between a spider and a scorpion. Also, camel spiders are venomous. Their venom won't usually kill a person, but it hurts. Getting bit by one would hurt. Getting bit by one in your throat while it's on its way down to your stomach would hurt a lot. So at least you'll be happy to know that Grylls chopped off the biting part before he ate it, but it was still totally squirming. We're sure he had a very good reason for not waiting for the thing to die before eating it. Maybe spiders lose their nutritional value immediately after death? Nope. We can't think of a single logical reason why one might need to do that. There is never a good reason to eat a live spider. Bear Grylls runs around a lot. He also does a lot of climbing things, rappelling down things, building things, swinging over things, and paddling things. And doing a lot of calorie-burning things is really not a great idea when you're lost because you've just given all your beef jerky to a bear, and giant camel spiders are scarce in the American wilderness. Unless you have an infinite source of food, or you're really good at hunting and game is super abundant in the place where you happen to be, lost people have to conserve calories. Running around is great for staying fit, but in the absence of sustenance, it's not great for staying alive. In fact, survivalist Jason Marsteiner doesn't even recommend hunting because it may burn more calories than it provides. Instead, Marsteiner says eat a handful of cooked bugs. You'll get more calories from bugs than from meat you've burned calories to get. So there is one ridiculously terrible thing Bear Grylls does that overshadows climbing waterfalls, scavenging power lines, and throwing meat at bears. Even worse than drinking his own urine or climbing inside a camel corpse. In fact, pretty much everything Bear Grylls does in his television show is incredibly dangerous and poor advice for surviving outdoors. But the one thing he does that really is the worst advice of all is risk-taking. Because as long as you have no broken bones, no raging case of explosive sickness, no spider bites inside your throat, and you haven't electrocuted yourself, you just might be able to walk back to civilization. If you do stupid things and get injured, though, you're going to freeze to death in a ravine somewhere, or get eaten by that grizzly bear once he's finished off your backpack full of beef jerky. Bear Grylls knows this, too. In fact, he once told an Outside magazine writer that he was perfectly aware how bad his advice is. Textbook survival is boring. You just stay where you are, don't take risks, and wait for help to come get you. That doesn't make for interesting television. It does, however, make for great advice. Thanks, Bear.
The original Mythbusters ran for a whopping 14 seasons, and during that time, the public fell in love with both the busting and the busters. Because of that widespread love and popularity, you might think you know all the secrets behind the making of this explosively entertaining show. But there are a few secrets the cast kept to themselves after the cameras stopped rolling, just waiting for the right fans to discover. The whole premise. Originally, Mythbusters was going to be quite literal, exploring well-known urban legends and actual myths. Over time, though, they dropped that idea, becoming more focused on what their viewers would like to see. Hence, some of the fan-favorite episodes explore whether certain movie scenes could realistically happen, or whether MacGyver could actually escape certain death time and time again. While these are definitely sillier concepts than the original premise of the show, in a world dominated by improbable blockbuster movies and amazing, potentially fake YouTube clips, the Mythbusters had plenty of material to work with. And if they ever come back, they'll still have plenty to work with, because we're just as confused now as we were then.
The labor involved in building this ball was intense.
Destroyed evidence. The Mythbusters were never strangers to destroying things. Invariably, testing various myths turned into an excuse to blow something up. However, there was one time where they used their destructive power to hide something from the fans, instead of sharing it with them. At the Silicon Valley Comic-Con in 2016, Adam Savage talked about their investigation of an easily available material and its supposed explosive properties. The discovery
was so explosive that we destroyed the footage and agreed never to say what we learned. Seriously.
Apparently, the tech-savvy team determined that destroying the footage was the only way to ensure it didn't pop up on YouTube a few years down the line, causing amateurs everywhere to go and blow themselves to bits.
It was absolutely terrifying.
Savage on Sesame Street. Over the years, Adam Savage has become a brand in and of himself, known the world over for his madcap personality and penchant for destructive myth-busting. Appropriately enough for the zany host, Savage made his television debut as a cartoon character on Sesame Street. Savage's father was behind many of the 30-second animated bits that ran in between other Sesame Street programming way back in the day. This led to a job where Savage's father had to produce 10 animations about children who were interested in figuring out how things work. Fittingly enough for a future Mythbuster, young Savage was tapped to be the voice of one of the 2 children featured in these spots.
I'll show you how a faucet works, Sheila.
Belleci Pipe Bomb. For most of the Mythbusters crew, mastering the art of crazy explosions was mostly a matter of keeping fans happy. After all, most of them had backgrounds in modeling, engineering, and robotics for the movie industry. But the team had a secret weapon in the form of Torrey Belleci. When he was giving a speech to the Davidson County Community College, Belleci let slip that, at the tender age of 11, he was not only learning how to make his own Super 8 films, but making his own flamethrower and even pipe bombs. While these are the kinds of skills that would probably get most modern children put on a governmental watch list, they served as valuable experience for the young man figuring out how to use the resources around him to achieve explosive entertainment.
You wonder why you always see him getting hurt.
Cannonball. Normally, the Mythbusters are paragons of safety. Not only do they give that firm "do not try this at home" warning to their viewers, but they operate in conjunction with local law enforcement and emergency services to make sure their myth-busting doesn't do any real damage. But one screw-up was a doozy, involving the team nearly destroying somebody's home. The team was testing myths related to homemade cannons and had set up water vats that were supposed to safely catch the cannonballs so nothing dangerous happened. Unfortunately, a cannonball blew through the cinder block wall on the set of the show. It ended up going on a rather amazing journey, in which it flew through somebody's front door, up their stairs, through their bedroom, and out of their house before jumping a thoroughfare, hitting the top of another home, and coming to a final rest by slamming into a minivan. Fortunately, only the minivan was hurt.
Well, it radically altered our entire safety procedure.
Social media backlash. Because their show is supposed to be based around rigorous scientific testing, the public is likely to assign a certain weight to endorsements the Busters make. So, most of the Mythbusters team have shied away from any kind of corporate involvement or sponsorship. All of this serves to partially explain why Grant Imahara received a lot of online criticism for his appearance in advertisements involving McDonald's products. The ad campaign featured Imahara myth-busting McDonald's myths, saying that chicken nuggets aren't made from pink slime, and that contrary to bizarre rumors, McRibs don't contain eyeballs or lips.
Are there lips and eyeballs in there, Jimmy?
However, the ads were weirdly specific. People who had never heard bizarre myths about eyeballs in their food were now, well, eyeballing their food choices more carefully. And the media had a field day, criticizing Imahara for selling out in the wake of being fired from Mythbusters.
There's no mystery. I've seen it with my own eyes. I've been there.
Regular fighting. In 2014, the Mythbusters were making headlines in a much more negative way than usual. Rumors swirled that the 2 main busters, Adam Savage and Jamie Heineman, always such a successful team on screen, actually hated each other off screen. Savage clarified that the 2 consider themselves as professionals who share a highly specific job, and they managed to get over any differences that they may have in the name of accomplishing this goal. As Savage put it, "We disagree about the small details every single day, on almost every single detail, but we don't really disagree about the big stuff." It's interesting to imagine then that some of the playful insults they toss each other's way on the show may actually have a real bite to them.
What, you gonna let me show you up on television?
You want to get whacked in the head with a phone book?
The Discovery Channel's look at the lives and losses of Bering Sea crabbers Deadliest Catch has been packing a punch since it debuted in 2005. Deadliest Catch distinguishes itself from other reality television in that creative editing is rarely necessary. Here are tragedies behind Deadliest Catch. Jake Anderson, the captain of the fishing boat Saga and a staple of Deadliest Catch since 2007, has suffered 2 devastating losses during his tenure on the show. In February 2009, his sister Chelsea Dawn Anderson died of pneumonia at age 37. A year later, his father, Dr. Keith Anderson, vanished. A retired school counselor, Dr. Anderson disappeared during a trip to Snohomish County, Washington. Authorities found his cell phone in the mud near the family home and his truck stuck on a logging road. Anderson's father was not found until 2.5 years later when a hiker spotted his bones just a mile from his truck. Jake Anderson was distraught when his father disappeared because of the approaching 1-year anniversary of Chelsea's death. Earlier, he had expressed concern that his father might have been the victim of foul play, citing blood on Keith's car keys and his missing truck. However, the family also admitted that Keith was addicted to oxycodone, which he often got from a friend he had planned to visit the day he vanished. Jake Harris lost his father, Phil, the immensely popular captain of the Cornelia Marie, in January 2010. That loss came during the 6th season of the show, and Jake, who had often struggled with drugs and was even suspected of doing them on the clock, began to fall apart shortly thereafter. First, he was involved in a hit-and-run accident in Seattle. Then, when sharing a ride home from a Washington casino with 3 new acquaintances, he was robbed and beaten within an inch of his life. Later, he was charged with drug possession and grand theft auto in Phoenix while joyriding with another man's wife. In February 2019, after being stopped by park rangers, he led state troopers on a dangerous chase around rural Washington in an RV. When authorities caught him, they found heroin, a stolen shotgun, and a suspended license. Police booked him for DUI, as well as various drug and weapons charges. A star of seasons 2 and 3 and the captain of the Maverick, Blake Painter was found in his Clatsop County, Oregon home on May 25, 2018, several days after he died of an apparent drug overdose. Authorities were called to the house when one of Painter's friends spotted Painter's body on the kitchen floor. When police entered the home, they were greeted with the terrible sorts of odors you would expect. Near Painter's body lay drug paraphernalia, including a pipe and a metal mint tin holding either heroin or meth, as well as prescription pills. Painter quit Deadliest Catch after season 3. Prior to his death at age 38, he had been arrested in Astoria, Oregon for DUI, heroin possession, reckless driving, and tampering with evidence. A number of vessels have been lost to disaster during the filming of Deadliest Catch, including the Big Valley, the Galaxy, the Ocean Challenger, and the Destination. Perhaps most poignant of these is the sinking of the Destination because it was preventable. The disaster was detailed in the 105th episode of the show titled The Mystery of the FV Destination. The Coast Guard found that the Destination was weighed down with roughly 330,000 pounds of ice. The disaster plunged several of the show's stars, including Sig Hansen and Jake Anderson, into mourning. The ship's crew was apparently under a great deal of pressure, having delayed their crabbing efforts to finish up fishing for cod. Had the Destination's captain, Jeff Hathaway, opted to stop on shore and break up some of the ice that had formed in the crab pots, its 6-member crew might have been saved. The crew of the vessels featured on Deadliest Catch have obviously gotten the most attention, but the behind-the-scenes staff of the show have likewise garnered a few headlines. In September 2016, a 22-year-old production manager, Matthew J. Schneider, was charged with using and selling cocaine. He was caught in a large undercover sting launched by Unalaska police. Schneider, who fled to California, can be heard on police recordings saying that his supervisor sometimes purchased large amounts of cocaine to distribute at Deadliest Catch parties, many of which took place in Dutch Harbor, Alaska. The investigation has not roped in any other members of the show's staff. By far, the sadder case is the story of Joe McMahon, a 25-year-old producer who was shot and killed in front of his parents' house in Pasadena, California, in the early hours of July 24, 2015. Neighbors reported hearing shots being fired and a car speeding away. McMahon's body was found in a neighbor's driveway. Police soon found Brandon Rafipor, 24, in a car nearby McMahon's home, dead of what appeared to be a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Police believe Rafipor, who knew McMahon, was the killer, but a motive in the shooting is unknown. In 2010, Captain Phil Harris succumbed to complications from a stroke captured on camera in Season 6. Then, in 2011, just a year after Harris's passing, Time Bandit deckhand Justin Tennyson passed away at age 33 in an Alaskan hotel. The official cause of death was complications from sleep apnea, but police found evidence of possible hard partying from the previous night. According to his relative Eddie Uwekulani, Tennyson was a family man who cherished his kids and loved the wild, boom-and-bust nature of life as a Bering Sea fisherman. Uwekulani also hinted that the pressures of Deadliest Catch fame might have played a role in Tennyson's demise. I don't know if we're all getting too relaxed or enjoying the movie part, but everybody is watching their health now. Sadly, despite that caution, the death of Tony Lara soon followed. Lara had taken over as skipper aboard the Cornelia Marie following the death of his close friend, Captain Phil Harris. In August 2015, Lara was found dead of a heart attack in Sturgis, South Dakota, where he was participating in a local biker rally. Joshua Tell Warner, a crew member of the fishing vessel Wizard, was arrested in May 2010 after a routine traffic stop. Viewers recognized Warner from his work on the show and alerted authorities to his presence in the Midwest. Wanted for 3 armed bank robberies in Eugene, Oregon, Warner was sentenced to 9.5 years. In a press conference about Warner's arrest, Eugene detective Jeff Donica said Warner was to some extent a victim of his own arrogance, saying, "I don't think you can end up on national TV, make a spectacle of yourself, and not end up getting caught for 3 bank robberies." Warner isn't the only Deadliest Catch star to find himself on the wrong end of the law. The aforementioned Jake Harris, son of Captain Phil Harris, has a rap sheet a mile long, and Sig Hansen, captain of the Northwestern, was arrested in May 2017 in Seattle for spitting on an Uber driver. Unlike Warner, Hansen didn't get jail time for the offense, only probation and an order to enter a treatment facility and stop using alcohol for a year. Meanwhile, Sig Hansen's brother Edgar pleaded guilty to sexual assault in July 2018.
At 2 o'clock in the morning, Kevin lost his footing and fell overboard into the icy black waters of the Bering Sea.
Deadliest Catch was a breakout hit for the Discovery Channel when it debuted in April 2005. Since then, it has garnered 16 Emmys and inspired countless other rough-around-the-edges reality shows like History Channel's Ice Road Truckers and Axemen. Why then would the Discovery Channel decide to sue some of the biggest stars of one of their most popular shows? Because those stars, the Hillstrand brothers, allegedly failed to honor their Deadliest Catch contracts by filming a spin-off called Alaskan Monster Hunt: Hillstranded. In late summer 2010, the Discovery Channel sued Jonathan and Andy Hillstrand for $3 million, claiming they skipped photo shoots and interviews to work on Hillstranded. The brothers were famous for their hard work and antics aboard the Time Bandit, skippered by Sig Hansen. All 3 men quit the show in 2010 to protest the lawsuit. A month later, the channel settled with the Hillstrands and Hansen, and the fishermen agreed to return for the next season. But some damage had undoubtedly been done. In 2013, another member of their Time Bandit crew, David Beaver Zielinski, was injured when a firework he was holding exploded in his hand. According to Zielinski, who sued the Hillstrand brothers for $2.7 million, he'd been ordered by Andy Hillstrand to shoot the firework at a rival boat, the Cape Caution. The firework shattered Zielinski's hand and forearm, effectively ending his career as a commercial crabber. During the 2017 trial, Zielinski claimed that Jonathan Hillstrand told him to lie about the cause of his injuries in order to protect himself and his brother, and that members of the Time Bandit crew and the Discovery Channel hid or destroyed evidence. Zielinski was eventually awarded $1.4 million in damages. The Deadliest Catch's newest foe is climate change, which is depleting the supply of all Bering Sea crab species, forcing the fishermen further and further from shore. The dire nature of this problem first became clear in season 13 when producers and talent alike began to wonder if there would be any action to film. In order to keep crabbers from overfishing, the Alaskan Department of Fish and Game has created a quota system based on an annual survey of the overall health of the crab population. As of 2017, the quota had to be cut in half, meaning Deadliest Catch captains like Sig Hansen could only count on half the income they were used to. Despite the grim realities, Hansen has said that he and his fellow fishermen were determined to press on. The fleet is going to need to go further and deeper. Nobody is going to take away a fisherman's way of life. I can guarantee you that this fleet will not quit, but we're always fearful that this will be our last year. Fishing for Alaskan king crab in the Bering Sea is not actually as dangerous as it gets. That dubious honor goes to Dungeness crab fishing, a less regulated, more reckless profession, and the inspiration behind the Discovery Channel spin-off Deadliest Catch, Dungeon Cove. Dungeon Cove follows 4 families of fishermen who work off the coast of Newport, Oregon, known to many as the Graveyard of the Pacific. Dungeon Cove premiered in September 2016, and already one man has sued his captain for negligence, claiming a lack of training and safety protocol led to his losing full use of one arm. The plaintiff, Nolan Dean, testified that he got his arm caught in a hydraulic lift and was then thrown overboard. The captain in the suit is named Gary the Ripper Ripka, which seems like a pretty bad stroke of luck. One of the more controversial characteristics of reality television is the chance that viewers might watch someone die. This scenario played out in Season 6 of Deadliest Catch, when Captain Phil Harris, skipper of the Cornelia Marie, had a massive stroke on deck while offloading snow crabs on St. George Island, Alaska. According to Phil's son Josh, his father wanted the cameras to keep rolling while he struggled to move and communicate. Following the stroke, he was transported to an Anchorage hospital where he died a week later of pulmonary embolism. The camera crews were at the hospital too, capturing Harris's final moments and his family as they dealt with the shock. Jonathan Hillstrand, co-captain of the Time Bandit, wasn't sure he could watch the emotional episode. "We're not characters, we're real people," he told the Los Angeles Times. Harris's death was devastating not only to his family and friends, but to fans of the show who had grown to love the chain-smoking, tattooed fisherman's no-nonsense approach to work and life. Whether Deadliest Catch regained its footing after Captain Phil's death is a matter of opinion.
American Pickers debuted on the History Channel in 2010 when it took the world of junk reselling by storm. Since then, it has run for over 20 seasons and counting. That's pretty impressive, especially when you consider that show creator Mike Wolfe spent 5 years unsuccessfully trying to sell his lifestyle-based reality show to any network that would buy it. Luckily for all of us, History eventually picked it up, which turned out to be a great decision. The first season of the show brought in 5.4 million viewers each week, becoming the highest-rated History show in years. That success is largely due to the show's outsized on-screen personalities, including Frank Fritz, Danielle Colby, and most importantly, Mike Wolfe himself. And perhaps Wolfe's quirkiest quirk is his obsession with old bicycles, which is front and center in many American Pickers episodes. That interest is a lifelong love which predates the show. Wolfe told Bicycling.com that he discovered at a very early age that he could ride circles around other kids, even those much older than him. And his first pick was actually an old bicycle he found in an overgrown weed patch at the age of 6.
And I was amazed that someone would throw out a bike, and so I thought to myself, if someone would throw out a bike, what else would they throw out?
Later, he'd see old bikes sitting in a dumpster, and he knew he had to have them. Pick it, flip it. In 1987, Wolfe scored a job building 13 bikes a day at Bike and Hike in Davenport, Iowa. Before long, Wolfe owned 2 bike shops of his own. He also got heavily involved in the bicycle racing scene, a career that lasted through most of the 1990s. Besides participating several times in the cross-Iowa race called the RAGBRAI, Wolfe also took home an impressive win at the Iowa State Time Trial Championships in 1998, just about the time he retired from professional racing. Beyond bicycles, Wolfe also has another serious interest: his family. According to Amo Mama, Wolfe met Jody Faith in 1994. She was intrigued by his work as a picker, and the two soon began dating. After nearly 2 decades together, the couple celebrated 2 major milestones in 2012, their wedding and the birth of their daughter, Charlie Faith Wolfe. Troubles would follow, though. Charlie was born with a cleft lip and palate, which required several surgeries, and in 2013, Jody was diagnosed with cancer. The demands of his family life nearly caused Wolfe to quit American Pickers. In 2016, he told WQAD, quote, "One more season and I'm done." Wolfe ended up staying on the show, but the challenges faced by his daughter inspired the family to get involved with the charity organization Operation Smile, whose purpose is to ensure that all children born with clefts are able to undergo the necessary corrective surgeries. Wolfe linked up with Isabel Bloom, an Iowa-based sculpting company, and had statues of Charlie produced. The statues, called Charlie's Smile, were sold as a fundraiser for Operation Smile. Additionally, Wolfe has participated in fundraising activities for a number of other charities, including St. Jude's Children's Hospital and his local animal shelters. And in 2020, he turned his efforts towards helping people in Tennessee who were struggling due to the financial strain caused by the COVID-19 pandemic.
That's community.
Given the rigorous demands of running a TV show while maintaining a family and doing so much charity work, it's amazing Mike has time to do anything else, but he somehow found the time to write 2 books as well. His first major publication was 2011's American Picker's Guide to Picking, which he co-wrote with Libby Calloway, Frank Fritz, and Danielle Colby. The book gives the ins and outs of making a profit off rusty gold. His second book, Kid Pickers, covers the same sort of thing, only this time it's targeted toward getting children interested in the picking life. And he even has a Spotify channel, Music to Pick By, featuring a variety of artists whose music is compatible with risking tetanus by rummaging through junk in a dilapidated barn. With so many different interests, there's no telling what Mike Wolfe will be up to next, and we can't wait to see what direction he picks.
Ghost Hunters was an unscripted paranormal investigation series on Sci-Fi that saw its cast, well, hunt ghosts. But how did this whole thing get started? Has the team actually discovered evidence of the paranormal, or has it all been one big con? Jason Hawes, former co-lead investigator for Ghost Hunters, founded a paranormal support group called Rhode Island Paranormal Society in 1990. In his book, Ghost Hunting: True Stories of Unexplained Phenomena from the Atlantic Paranormal Society, Hawes writes about RIPS, saying, "It wasn't a ghost hunting organization, at least not at first. It was more of a support group. I was trying to connect with people who had gone through experiences similar to mine. Those experiences included seeing things." He said, "Usually it started with a mist, out of which emanated a dim light, and then out of the light came other things, including see-through animals and full-body human apparitions." They terrified him, but the support group and, bizarrely, eating green olives helped him feel less crazy. During the early days of RIPS, Hawes received a call from someone offering to improve their website for free. That person turned out to be Grant Wilson. After a period of working together, Hawes and Wilson wanted to develop a more rational approach to investigating paranormal activity, something that relied less on emotions and more on science and logic. The duo formed the Atlantic Paranormal Society, TAPS, which was the start of what would eventually grow into the Ghost Hunters made famous on television. In addition to the standard electromagnetic field meters and electric voice phenomenon recorders, EMF and EVP devices respectively, Ghost Hunters investigators use a wide variety of unconventional items to detect paranormal activity. Among the more unusual items are helium balloons, which Grant Wilson says are used in cases where property owners experience cold spots thought to be made by nearby ghosts. Half-deflated balloons can be put into play to show that, no, there's just an actual draft in the home.
You don't even got to take it out of here, just make it roll back and forth.
A few other items in their toolbox that you wouldn't expect to see include crepe paper, which is sometimes used as a cheap motion detector, and talcum powder, which Wilson says ghost hunters sometimes sprinkle on the ground to pick up footprints left behind by creeping apparitions. Steve Gonzalez, former lead investigator and case manager for Ghost Hunters, recommended some of his favorite tools of the trade and a gear guide for road trippers, and put a good old-fashioned flashlight at the top of the list. Just goes to show that it doesn't take a lot of money to hunt ghosts.
For what we do, I get excited. Like when you see a new flashlight, I'm like, ooh, check that one out.
There's plenty of evidence Ghost Hunters is fake and always has been. While filming at the Overbrook Asylum for the 2009 episode Garden State Asylum, a member of the crew left behind what appeared to be staging notes. Further first-hand evidence is found in a Reddit thread of people involved in various reality shows. In it, a user going by the name Boss K Hogg says, "I was on set for a filming of Ghost Hunters in Buffalo. On the show, they are investigating an upper level of the Buffalo Central Terminal when they hear a disembodied voice say, 'Get out.' It was the property manager on a lower level yelling at some homeless people to clear out. Everyone knew it was him, but it somehow made it in the show as an unexplained event." It's Reddit, so take that proof with a grain of salt, but it definitely seems plausible. Even the equipment used on the show has been called into question. An in-depth article by The Atlantic details how EMF meters, specifically the K2 meters frequently used on ghost hunters, are, quote, erratic, prone to false positives, and easily manipulated. EMF meters supposedly detect electromagnetic fields. The readings spike when in proximity of something as simple as wiring in the walls of a building, which isn't accurate, but great if you want evidence of ghosts for your TV show. If the ghost sleuthing business suddenly dried up, many of the investigators on Ghost Hunters, both past and present, have side jobs they could rely on to keep food on their tables. The New York Times reports both Jason Hawes and Grant Wilson are former Roto-Rooter plumbers, so they're the ones to call if your pipes are full of tormented souls. Kristen Luman, the new co-lead investigator for A&E's Ghost Hunters reboot, is a licensed hypnotherapist. Former tech manager Steve Gonzalez is a film producer, even working alongside Guillermo del Toro to create the horror short The Captured Birth. And Daryl Marston, another new co-lead investigator on the reboot, is a former firearms instructor and a contractor. Looking at that list, compiling a team that knows how to properly fire a gun, fix a leaky pipe, patch up the wall when it's fixed, film the whole process, and then hypnotize you into thinking the whole mess never happened sounds like a pretty well-rounded crew. Donna LaCroix, a case manager and investigator for Ghost Hunters and Ghost Hunters International, has been very vocal in expressing her distaste towards the show, as well as her former cast members. Calling into a radio program called Ghost Divas in 2009, LaCroix said that her contract while on the show was so bad that she nearly went bankrupt. Plus, everyone was out to stab each other in the back, and there was a staging crew for episodes. As for her opinions about Ghost Hunter leads Grant Wilson and Jason Hawes, she referred to them as, quote, the Kings during her call, going so far as to say they treated tech manager and investigator Brian Harnois like their, quote, whipping boy to the point of mental abuse. In 2012, Harnois scared his fans, friends, and family when he went missing after posting a note on his Facebook that appeared to threaten self-harm, which has since been deleted. In 2012, Grant Wilson, co-lead investigator for Ghost Hunters, announced during an episode that he'd be leaving the show at the end of his 8th year to focus on other aspects of his personal life.
Jay and I have been talking, and it's been a very difficult decision to make, but I'm going to be leaving Ghost Hunters.
In a recent interview with Den of Geek, Wilson says that at the time he felt as though the show had started to rely on gimmicks and that they were, quote, kicking a dead horse, which ultimately led to his decision to leave the show.
I was tired, and I was ready to get back to my family.
But in 2019, A&E picked up Ghost Hunters for a reboot, with Wilson returning to head up a whole new team of investigators. This thrilled fans, while also causing a bit of confusion. What prompted Wilson to change his tune? In an interview with TV Insider, Grant said, I never stopped investigating the paranormal. My youngest is about to graduate from high school and he's got it all figured out, so why not get back into it?
Still doing it, still gonna do it, we'll always do it. And just because, you want to take a break doesn't mean people don't need help.
Makes sense, but why didn't his previous partner in Ghost, Jason Hawes, come back as well? Looking at the chain of events for Ghost Hunters, specifically those having to do with key members leaving the show, there are a few mysteries to puzzle over. Why is it that Grant Wilson was the first to announce he was leaving, then returned for the A&E reboot in 2019? But co-lead investigator Jason Hawes rode the sinking ship to the very end of its run on Sci-Fi and stayed gone. You'd think that when A&E picked the show back up for new seasons, and Wilson announced he'd be returning, Hawes would have jumped on board as well, but that wasn't the case. Instead, Hawes heads an entirely different show with a very similar name, Ghost Nation, which debuted on the Travel Channel in October 2019. Although Wilson and Hawes have both stuck with their stories that when it came to their working relationship everything was rosy, it's hard not to wonder if that's as true as they make it seem. Shortly after Grant announced he was leaving Ghost Hunters in 2012, he and Hawes listed Spalding Inn, a New Hampshire property they co-owned, for sale. Hawes spoke about Grant's initial split during an episode of Beyond Reality Radio, which he co-hosts, saying, anytime a cast member leaves, there is a change in the dynamics of the team. Sometimes good, sometimes not good. If there was ever a feud here, Hawes and Wilson are playing it cool. On June 7, 2016, Jason Hawes posted a message to Facebook that read, with heavy heart, we want to inform everyone that we are choosing at this time to end our relationship with Sci-Fi Channel. Further insight, however, points more towards a cancellation than a voluntary departure. During a speaking engagement in Vermont in 2015, Chris Williams, a former case manager and investigator for Ghost Hunters and its spin-off series Ghost Hunters International, said that a dip in ratings and the subsequent envelope-pushing stunts in a desperate effort to bring them up again led to Ghost Hunters International getting canceled. In an episode of Ghost Hunters International titled Sacrificed Mayan Spirits, Belize, cast member Susan Slaughter cut herself during a bloodletting ritual, and Williams thought that the stunt was too much. After expressing her reservations and then pleading for the episode not to air, Williams quit when her requests were ignored. Knowing this, it would make sense that Ghost Hunters, which experienced a rating dip of its own, was next on the chopping block. In 2015, the year before Hawes' announcement, the show was averaging ratings of just 1.7 million viewers, a significant drop from the 3 million it brought in during earlier seasons. And Sci-Fi was going in a different direction towards mostly scripted television. Within a few years, only one paranormal show, Paranormal Witness, remained. The women of Ghost Hunters have proven themselves more than capable of holding their own. One woman in particular, Amy Bruni, an investigator for the show from 2008 to 2014, sleuthed spooks while pregnant. In a 2013 interview with Glamour, Bruni said, if we're local, I'll investigate until I go into labor. As long as I'm close to the hospital, it's fine. A proclivity for the paranormal has fallen within the wheelhouse of women for many years now, believe it or not. When the director Paul Feig made the announcement in 2014 that he'd be making a new Ghostbusters film with an all-female cast, the negative reaction was immediate. Bruni, as one would guess, had a lot to say on the topic and admitted in a 2015 Huffington Post article that at first she thought the angle was, quote, a stunt, but gave it more thought and concluded it was actually a perfect way to add to the arc of the films without attempting to replace the original cast. She also chimed in with some pearls as to why women have every right to be ghost hunters or fans of the paranormal in general. I would say the paranormal field strongly skews female. When you attend a paranormal convention, you've usually got 75% ladies to 25% men. However, on television, the field is strongly represented by men, and frankly, it's just not accurate. Throughout the years, Jason Hawes has spoken about the infamous Amityville haunting in such a way that leads one to believe he doesn't believe it at all. In an interview with the blog Geek Mom in 2015, Hawes was asked what location he would investigate if he had unlimited access, and he said, "To answer this, I would need a time machine. I would want to see what truly happened at the Amityville house. I know the claims and have studied the case for many years. I just believe there was way too much hype and not enough truth to it." Furthering evidence of his doubts on the matter, Hawes shared a video of the home's patriarch George Lutz discussing the Amityville events to his Facebook page in 2018 with the caption, "In this video, George Lutz talks about his and his family's experiences at the Amityville house. Take a listen and tell me your thoughts, real or hype?" Seems like Hawes has long since answered that question for himself.
Old-timers might remember the History Channel as a stream of World War II documentaries, but a lot has changed since then. The new History is a cranky old conspiracy theorist who secretly binges reality shows. Here are some of the times the History Channel lied to you. In 1945, Adolf Hitler took his own life in his underground bunker. That's reality. Conspiracy theories about how he might have escaped aren't just wrong, but deeply offensive. Unfortunately, back in 2014, people got riled up when the FBI declassified documents reporting on the possibility that Hitler had actually run away to South America, shaved his mustache, and assumed a new identity. Here's the thing. FBI reports don't mean something really happened because the FBI has to document everything no matter how stupid it is. So every time a lunatic or attention seeker claimed to see Hitler, the FBI wrote it down. That's their job. As Skeptoid points out, they have been forced to document all kinds of nonsensical falsehoods. Then in 2015, according to Variety, the History Channel basically gave real history the middle finger. The reality show Hunting Hitler, apparently an effort to finally settle the matter with a crack team of investigators, was really nothing more than a ratings ploy. The series showed the team go to Argentina and investigate false leads, which proved nothing whatsoever because, well, no genuine evidence exists. Aside from trivializing the subject matter, Hunting Hitler also trivialized reality. Biopics deserve some leeway because turning a real person's life into an interesting movie or series can be hard. But according to historian David Nassau, the epic 8-part drama series The Kennedys, first optioned by the History Channel in 2009, played so fast and loose with reality that it might as well have used a different name for the family. Overall, the big problem seems to be that the show's producer was trying to turn the Kennedy family into the family from The Godfather, leading to a series full of crazy sexual escapades, sibling rivalry, and big money bribing. Some of the more bizarre fictional plot twists inserted into the story involve patriarch Joe Kennedy Sr., who is depicted as giving Jackie Kennedy a $1 million trust fund to stay with his son, which makes no sense, and also paying off a Chicago mobster to secure JFK's presidential win. Neither of these theories have any credibility and are basically just there to spice up the narrative. The actual Kennedys are a powerful family, but whether you love them or hate them, these TV characters weren't the real deal. The History Channel spent 2 years holding a place on their schedule for the Kennedys' premiere, but when the series was finally ready in 2011, they quietly moved the series to their Canadian branch, History Television, according to the Globe and Mail. It's long past time to rectify a sin that's been perpetuated for centuries. Assuming the biblical characters were real people, none of them were white folks. All those people were from either North Africa or the Middle East, so there's no way they had European features or English accents. Yes, both classical artwork and Hollywood have been lying about this for a crazy long amount of time, but it's the 21st century, and the History Channel miniseries The Bible has no excuse for featuring such a whitewashed cast. To make things even worse, The Guardian notes that out of the few major characters played by minority actors, one of them is Satan. Yes, the devil. Could they be more offensive? Ironically, the show's producers claimed the program was made out of a quest to cure Bible illiteracy, but the series is Bible illiterate itself. The show cherry-picks elements from the easy biblical tales while ignoring more ambiguous, dark, or confusing aspects. The result is a clean, sanitized, easy-breezy version that distorts the entire message of the text, rendering it unrecognizable. In other words, if your knowledge of the Bible comes from history's The Bible, you really don't know all that much about the Bible. The ancient Maya were unquestionably amazing. Their brilliant insights regarding mathematics and astronomy were so far beyond their time that it's hard to even conceptualize how they did it. That's why in 2012, people got freaked out that the Mayan calendar randomly ended on December 21st, 2012. The History Channel did a lot of fear-mongering about this stuff, even referring to 2012 as the long-awaited doomsday.
2012. A date that is prophesied as the end of the world.
Then 2012 came and went with no apocalypse. What happened? Don't blame the Maya, blame the History Channel. As National Geographic explains, the Maya never predicted a doomsday. December 21st, 2012 was simply the end of the 13th cycle, at which point the calendar would reset to 0. Basically, it's like how you put up a new calendar every January. So if those ancient Maya had ever visited us via time machine, they would have scoffed at how all these silly 21st century folks totally misinterpreted their calendar. Wouldn't it be awesome if Bigfoot was real? The world would feel a little more magical for sure. But there's no magic to be found in the 2015 History Channel special Bigfoot Captured, a rating stunt that depicted a supposedly real Sasquatch being apprehended. While some cool stuff came out of the program, such as an 8-foot 3D printed Bigfoot skeleton that was reported on by the Idaho State Journal, the special was deceptively advertised, featuring no clear documentation that it was fake outside of a small disclaimer saying the program featured, quote, some dramatization.
Something's out here, dude. Something's watching. I don't know.
As Paste points out, people all over Twitter freaked out about the whole thing. Snopes even wrote up the series. Considering that much of Bigfoot's popularity today is the result of pranks, the fakeness of Bigfoot Captured perhaps isn't shocking. Still, the whole thing raises questions about the responsibility of filmmakers, and it's shady that the network interviewed professors without informing them of the film's purpose.
There are no Sasquatches. There are no Big Feet.
Everything on Ancient Aliens is faker than fake, according to the Smithsonian. Even when the show pulls from real sources, it distorts, misquotes, and mischaracterizes them so badly that it ends up becoming a cheesy sci-fi epic rather than a genuine documentary. When history isn't making up narratives about how aliens may have slaughtered the dinosaurs to make way for humans, it's promoting even zanier nonsense like the idea that ancient Egyptians flew extraterrestrial airplanes and Martians created human life. In order to create these zany theories, the program basically figures out a conclusion, finds a real event that has absolutely nothing to do with their narrative, and then omits any information that doesn't support that narrative. Then, if something doesn't make sense, chalk it up to those oh-so-mysterious aliens. Boom. Ancient Aliens is like a high school prank that got way out of hand. The disappearance of daring pilot Amelia Earhart in 1937 is a genuine mystery, and while there are some whacked-out theories about what happened, most people have accepted that her true ending was probably a lot more tragic. That's why the whole world got pumped about the History Channel's 2017 special Amelia Earhart: The Lost Evidence, which theorized that Amelia and her navigator, Fred Noonan, were captured by the Japanese and may have even lived for some years afterward. On the surface, the special wasn't just some Ancient Aliens nonsense. The conversation centered around a new photo the network had unearthed, reportedly dug up from the U.S. National Archives, which depicted Earhart and Noonan both alive in Japan.
You think this is Amelia Earhart? That's right.
While nothing was confirmed, the story got national attention. Then, 2 days later, the whole thing got debunked. According to National Geographic, an intrepid internet blogger found the exact same photo in a Japanese coffee table travelogue published in 1935, 2 years before the famous pilot disappeared. Oops. The History Channel's program Mountain Men, about hard-edged survivalists scraping by in the brutal wilderness, is ridiculously embellished. For example, just ask one of the show's stars, Tom Orr, who joked to the Billings Gazette that the show always exaggerated his life to seem more dangerous and less mundane than it really was. Even the more exciting incidents like wild animal sightings aren't quite what they seem, such as when a wolf encounter was recreated with regular dogs.
This is a dangerous wolf, so I think he'll be back.
According to Alabama Entertainment, Orr's fellow Mountain Men star Eustace Conway once admitted to Eat, Pray, Love author Elizabeth Gilbert that his crazy wild man persona was mostly an act. While Conway does live out in the wilderness, by all accounts, he's not the broke, penniless fella the show makes him out to be.
I feel good about that achievement.
Texans take their history seriously, and they don't like a bunch of outsiders painting them the wrong way. So back in 2015, when the History Channel aired the drama series Texas Rising, which claimed to be a historical drama about the creation of the Texas Rangers, Lone Star locals stood up and took notice of the show's many historical inaccuracies. Soon afterward, the internet got flooded with so many angry Texans that even the Wall Street Journal commented on it. Texas Monthly ripped the series to shreds, pointing out lazily incorrect dates, inaccurate fashion trends, and the fact that the show's desert landscape had more in common with classic Hollywood westerns than the real Texas locations where historical events took place. Basically, the History Channel walked into a Texas bar, said all the wrong things, and got punched out by the locals. Maybe they'll be more careful next time?
Go ahead. Make my day.
In 2011, Comedy Central's The Daily Show celebrated the holiday season with a section called Tree Fighting Ceremony, where host Jon Stewart noted an amusing anecdote. Supposedly, from the years 1789 to 1856, the U.S. Congress valued Christmas Day so little that they simply used it as a regular workday. Well, fun-spoiling PolitiFact swooped in, studied up, and pointed out that this allegation is completely inaccurate, as both the House and Senate pretty much always took the day off. Don't blame Stewart or Comedy Central for this pants-on-fire level error, however. The true fault lies with their source, the History Channel, which in 1997 aired a special called Christmas Unwrapped, The History of Christmas. Stewart aired a clip from the special on his show.
The United States Congress sat in session and continued to stay open on Christmas Day for most of the next 67 years.
Oops. Clearly, Stewart and The Daily Show producers thought they could trust a channel named History.
You know what, History Channel? You have me for the last time!
Come on, you didn't really think Pawn Stars was real, did you? If you couldn't tell just from watching it and cringing every time literally anyone delivers their lines, the actual interactions are highly staged. Those seemingly spontaneous customer interactions you see on TV are arranged way beforehand. Even the bargaining and dialogue is lightly scripted and practiced in advance, probably to make sure neither party storms off in a huff about getting a bad deal. In 2012, star Corey Harrison told Huffington Post that these days he's far more likely to privately meet someone in an empty hallway than to bargain with them at the counter.
The Storage Wars myth of finding the coolest and most valuable treasures simply by opening the right locker is about as realistic as the Goonies. Here are the reasons why what you see on the show is anything but reality.
Aspect of the series is faked.
There's always been speculation that Storage Wars and other reality TV programs are fake, but when a reality star actually comes forward and says so on an actual legal document, it can get kind of hard to keep suspending that disbelief. Hester's lawsuit referred to a contest and contestants, and seemed to allege that Storage Wars is a game show that's been rigged. A&E, on the other hand, said the show is protected by the First Amendment, which basically gives producers the right to run it however they like.
Does it really matter if the games are rigged? No!
The games are rigged?
Yes!
It's kind of a strange argument that essentially lies are protected by the First Amendment. A&E seems to basically be admitting that it's all just a ruse. But it does make a certain weird kind of sense if you also consider that scripted dramas don't have an obligation to tell the truth. Really, the only thing that separates reality television from scripted television is perception. You might suppose that reality TV is supposed to be real, but there aren't any laws that say it has to be. Hester did not initially emerge triumphant in the suit, but it wasn't because the judge decided the show was on the up and up. The judge actually decided that all the fakery was fine because it was, quote, expressive free speech. According to Screener, the judge ultimately decided that Hester wasn't specific enough with his accusations of wrongful termination and threw out the case. But he also said Hester could refile with a more specific accusation. That's what Hester did, and in July 2014, the case was finally settled for an undisclosed amount. The settlement really only addressed the accusations of wrongful termination, not the fakery accusations, so reality TV can just go on doing what it's always done. Because if fake reality television is simply expressive free speech, then there really isn't any expectation of honesty between reality TV producers and their audiences, at least legally. Here's the punchline. According to International Business Times, after the lawsuit was over, A&E welcomed Hester back to the show. Hester was a popular character, and before his return, the show's ratings were on the decline. Plus, on-screen conflict is great for reality television, and you can't really sue your employer and come back to the office without some residual tension lingering around.
This is America. I can say whatever I want.
Beyond that, there are some more sinister reasons why keeping Hester close is probably a good thing for the network. We've already seen what happens when he's not working for A&E. Under contract, he's probably more likely to refrain from ratting out all the fakery at his first opportunity. What better way to make sure a former employee stays loyal than to make him an employee again? The show's producers are used to the accusations. The summer before Hester filed his lawsuit, executive producer Tom Beers defended the show during a panel discussion sponsored by the National Geographic Channel. When one of the panelists said something about the rumors that the containers on Storage Wars were, quotes, salted, Beers said, "Nope, I can honestly tell you that the stuff found in those containers are found in storage containers." His statement left a lot of wiggle room. If the stuff was bought at antique stores, then transported to storage containers, then technically that statement would still be accurate. Beers also went on to say that they might have 20 or 30 auctions and occasionally just combine their finds into one locker so they don't have to film all the lockers individually. That's not exactly salting, but it isn't reality either. In that same National Geographic panel, Beers also admitted to scripting interviews with cast members. It was excused as a substitute for narration, because no one likes to listen to those deadpan off-camera narrators. Beers said, "I have to admit there's some writing involved. We do it in Storage Wars, we do it in America's Lost Treasures. I'm so tired of narration driving story. Stars are given about half their lines, according to Beers, so they can tell their own stories." That seems like a minor offense compared to some of the other things Storage Wars has been accused of. And anyway, it's not like anyone was actually fooled by the stellar acting chops of the Storage Wars stars.
Are you guys gonna be able to rummage through stuff and dresses like that?
Yeah, we can rummage through anything with anything on.
On the other hand, is it reality if it's scripted? And more importantly, is reality more important than the quality of the entertainment? According to Business Insider, Hester lobbed a whole lot of accusations at the show, and one of those was that instead of just letting the drama unfold, the network would sometimes pay for the lockers bid on by less experienced members of the cast, so the playing field would be even. So while the bigger, more established storage locker moguls were using their own money to invest in lockers, the smaller businesses were depending on A&E to keep them in the game. Admittedly, it wouldn't be much of a war if one of the armies had an overwhelming advantage. Plus, if you're going to let your weaker cast members go bankrupt on bad purchases or get constantly outbid because they lack capital, you're going to have an unsustainably high turnover in your cast. So, from a pragmatic standpoint, this is probably one of A&E's lesser accused crimes. According to Business Insider, Hester's lawsuit also weirdly called out another particular act of fakery, claiming nearly every aspect of the series is faked, even down to the plastic surgery that one of the female cast members underwent in order to create more sex appeal for the show. That particular accusation led fans to speculate about who went under the knife. It does seem like kind of a low blow on Hester's part. The show might be fake, and one of the women on it might have had plastic surgery, but it seems like there's plenty of ammunition against a network without having to drag other cast members into it.
Before the stars of Storage Wars can find treasure among the cardboard and Rubbermaid, there first must be an auction.
And the auction has to be fun and exciting, or viewers will say forget it and watch Better Call Saul instead.
Saul Goodman. Yeah, it's like Saul Good, man. That guy has a lot of energy.
Hester's complaint claimed A&E would often fake the auctions themselves. The suit stated, while on location filming an auction, defendants also film footage of the cast members and the public bidding when no actual auction is taking place, in order to make it appear that any of the cast members is bidding at any given auction, whether or not he or she is actually bidding on the units. There's some other, lesser fakery related to the auctions. For example, the cameras follow cast members as they leave before the end of the auction, presumably to inspect the contents of the locker they just bought, but the winning bidder usually isn't allowed to see the inside of the locker until the day after the auction. According to Radar Online, the accusations of salting aren't unfounded. There's a paper trail that shows stuff was planted inside storage lockers. A source with behind-the-scenes knowledge reportedly approached the outlet claiming there are invoices, checks, and other documentation where the production company actually compensated cast members for supplying items that were planted in the lockers and then discovered on camera. The source explained that cast members would charge A&E a rental fee if they would put their own valuable stuff in the storage lockers to later be found. Because this was essentially a business transaction, auction, there are receipts and invoices and checks that provide evidence of fakery. Another anonymous source speaking to NPR's On the Media in 2012 said he was acquainted with someone whose job was to purchase the antiques that the producers would then plant in the storage lockers. Sometimes producers would even have things appraised weeks before the cast members actually discovered it on camera. The anonymous reality television employee who spoke to On the Media also had some damning things to say about the appraisers themselves. He said the show would bring items found in lockers to appraisers, which were not always or even often actual appraisers, and knowing that ruins the excitement of the show. So, the auctions aren't always auctions, the items found in the storage lockers aren't always found in the storage lockers, and the appraisers who decide the value of the items aren't actually appraisers, and therefore probably don't know what they're talking about. Also, the stars say lines fed to them by the producers, and the whole thing is tainted by network cash. What channel is Better Call Saul on again?
And that includes the 9 airings at 3:20 in the afternoon on channel KWBV. That is a prime slot.
Anyone who has ever owned a storage unit can tell you what a normal storage unit actually looks like. It's full of spiders, everything is covered in dust, the boxes have all been haphazardly piled because it's really just junk that you don't want to deal with right now, and the monthly storage fee seems worth it compared to losing a weekend decluttering when you could be half asleep on your couch watching Storage Wars. If you pay attention to the show, you know that neatly arranged storage units tend to have elevated chances of containing valuable items. And if it's true that the storage units are salted, it seems logical that they're also staged to fit the narrative. Before there was Storage Wars, there was Antiques Roadshow, the original television series for finding out the value of an attic knickknack and the best way to watch people attempt to be gracious as a polite appraiser crushes their dreams by telling them that the terrifying doll they found in Grandma's basement isn't worth a wooden nickel. Antiques Roadshow has actual antiques and collectibles cred, and guess what? They totally think Storage Wars is fake. Antiques Roadshow executive producer Marsha Bemko said in an interview, quote, "It's an entertainment show." She added that she thinks shows in the genre help generate interest in antiques, which is ultimately good for her show too. She also pointed out that the appraisers on Antiques Roadshow are more likely to provide a fair assessment of the items that are featured on the show since they don't have a financial stake in the buying or selling of those items. One of the show's appraisers added, "I think it's also important to remember that those shows are totally staged. Is it really reasonable to think that someone on Storage Locker Wars is going to find a $100,000 item that somebody left in a storage locker? The show isn't called Storage Locker Wars, but point taken."
Forged in Fire might be one of the strangest reality shows out there, but look underneath all that smoke and steel and you'll find a fascinating history, a little danger, and a whole lot of controversy. This is the untold truth of Forged in Fire. If you're wondering how someone comes up with the idea for a TV show like this, want to know more? You simply pay attention to your teenage kids. Tim Healy, head of programming and development at the History Channel, told Decider that the inspiration for Forged in Fire came from his 14-year-old daughter's love of cooking competition shows such as Chopped. As anyone who's ever interacted with a 14-year-old kid knows, connecting with them can be pretty challenging. So to spend some time with her, Healy would sit and watch those culinary shows, and he began to wonder how he could do a cooking competition show of his own without having to include any cooking. He also knew from experience that whenever a reality show featured a weapon of some kind, the ratings went up. The idea eventually evolved towards bladed weapons specifically, but Healy stuck with his initial inspiration, structuring the format like a cooking show with new competitors every episode. When Tim Healy was first spinning up the idea for his reality series, he imagined a show where people created weapons from scratch, but he hadn't locked down just what kind of weapons he wanted his show to revolve around. In fact, he consulted with Jodie Flynn, a fellow producer who was pitching a similar concept at the time called Gunsmiths. Gunsmiths was a riff on Project Runway that would have seen a fixed cast creating their own guns, with different challenges every week and a focus on the interactions and relationships between the Smiths. But Healy really wanted a fresh group of Smiths every week in order to take a deeper dive into the culture surrounding the craft. On top of that, his research told him that on other reality shows, it was bladed weapons that resulted in huge rating spikes. Soon enough, the gun aspect of the show was put aside in favor of the bladed weapons approach that has served the show so well. As either group will tell you, there's a big difference between being a weapons expert and being a bladesmith. And you might imagine that judging bladesmiths on their craft would require a considerable knowledge of smithing. Indeed, judges Jay Nielsen, David Baker, and Ben Abbott have extensive and impressive blade making experience. Hosts Will Willis and Doug Makida, however, came to the series with exactly zero bladesmithing knowledge. Willis is a former Army Ranger with a ton of experience using weapons of all sorts, and Makida is an edged weapon expert, knife designer, and martial artist, so it's not like they don't have the knowledge to judge a finished weapon. Still, the producers must have been a little concerned about this lack of smithing expertise. Luckily, Willis had finally begun learning the basics of forging by the show's 4th season. Moreover, the History Channel even posted proof of Nielsen teaching both Willis and Makida how to blade smiths, putting to rest any complaints that the smiths competing on the show might not be getting the best judging experience.
That looks good. Now it will cut.
It takes a lot of skill to get cast on any show focused on a particular craft, and Forged in Fire is no different. After all, you can't just wander the local mall asking people if they want to come make a 12th century Crusader sword. You need to find actual bladesmiths who have a shot at successfully making the weapons they're tasked with. Contestant Gabriel Mabry of Doberman Forge has detailed some of the steps he had to go through, including answering questions about metallurgy and doing both a preliminary interview and a background check. And contestant Dustin Perella told the Richland Source that the induction process goes even further than that. After applying to be on the show and sitting for multiple interviews via phone and video, he had to actually forge a blade to the producer's specifications and submit photos of the finished product. And after all that, he still had to do a couple more interviews before being invited to compete on the show. Every week on Forged in Fire, 4 bladesmiths accept the challenge of making whatever weapon the show chooses, and the winner receives $10,000. That's pretty good money, even when you take the extreme effort involved into account, both in making the weapon and in getting on the show in the first place. But the 3 losing smiths get nothing, aside from a trip to New York City where the series is filmed, and the chance to be on TV, of course. And that's too bad, because the median salary for a bladesmith is estimated to be about $31,000 with a low of $20,000, so most of these smiths could probably use that cash. Still, appearing on the show has other benefits. For example, Gabe Mabry told the Stanley News and Press that before being a contestant, his bladesmithing work was just a side hustle he did along with several other jobs, but after being on the show, he was able to begin bladesmithing full-time. It's easy to imagine that making weapons comes with a few legal complications, and there are a lot of rumors swirling around about what happens to all those weapons after filming on Forged in Fire is finished. Many viewers note that weapons from past shows are often spotted hanging on the walls of the studio, and some have claimed that under New York state law, the weapons have to be classified as props and kept by the production company. In other words, according to the rumors, contestants don't get to keep the weapons they worked so hard for. That sounds reasonable, especially when you've got a bunch of people making something terrifying like a Moro Chris. But according to reality TV writer Andy Denart, it's also 100% false. Denart actually spoke with a spokesperson for the show who clarified that while the winning weapon is kept on display on their winner's wall, everyone else gets their weapon back. The spokesperson said, "As a symbol of our gratitude and out of respect for the amount of work put into the weapon, we return it to the creator." As with so many other things, watching a show about bladesmiths isn't really a substitute for learning how to smith the right way. As former contestant Kim Stahl told the New York Daily News, "Not every episode outlines all the procedures that were followed. In other words, the magic of editing means you might not be shown some absolutely essential, yet kinda dull, parts of the process. For example, many experienced bladesmiths have complained that while the show loves a fiery quench, it never really shows the metal being tempered, which is a slower, less showy process designed to increase the durability of the metal after hardening." They also complain that the judges often misuse bladesmithing jargon and speculate that many of the failed weapons are the result of steps being skipped by the smiths. That's all fine for something presented for entertainment purposes, of course. Just keep in mind, you're not going to be ready to start your own bladesmithing business after seeing a few episodes. And nobody learned that lesson harder than John Gomes. In 2017, Forged in Fire fan John Gomes of Cohoes, New York, decided to spend one extremely windy afternoon trying to make a hammer in his backyard. To do this, he used a fire he started in a barrel as a forge. The fire soon grew out of control and the wind did the rest, spreading the fire to Gomes' home and then nearby apartment buildings, eventually driving nearly 30 people from their homes. Sean Morse, the mayor of Cohoes, called it the worst disaster the city had ever seen. Okay, obviously a show about making bladed weapons is going to be at least a little dangerous, but it's not actually the blades that you should worry about if you wander onto the set of Forged in Fire, although they don't exactly help.
I just finished it and it was perfectly sharp and I put a coat of oil on it and then it slipped out of my hand and I went to grab it as it was falling and it just cut through this finger.
Really though, it's the heat you've got to worry about. You know, the fire from the title. With 4 forges lined up next to each other, plus the heat of the television studio lights, the set can get seriously hot. And while the place is vented, it's vented against asphyxiation, not heat. Of course, the heat is part of the challenge and experienced bladesmiths are used to working under similar conditions, but that doesn't necessarily prepare you for the intense baking heat of the show's set. While the contestants are provided with plenty of water and encouraged to drink it frequently, the show has seen several cases of heat exhaustion occur, and there's been at least one episode where a contestant has collapsed. Watching professionals and accomplished hobbyists work to a high standard is one of the greatest pleasures of reality show television, especially when it involves something exotic like handcrafting bladed weapons. But a lot of the weapons on this show aren't so great. Some are ugly, some are easily broken, and some simply don't do the one thing a blade is supposed to do: cut stuff. Bladesmith Steve Calvert analyzed the show's episodes and determined that most of the failed weapons were due to some pretty fundamental forging errors, ones you would think experienced bladesmiths would know to avoid. But it's important to remember that this is a TV show, after all, and the contestants are working under artificial time and material constraints. They're also striving to create a weapon they're probably unfamiliar with, all on an incredibly hot set that's crowded with equipment and other smiths, as well as a TV crew. You can't blame them for messing up once or twice. Anytime weapons are involved with pretty much anything, things can get a little complicated, and that's also true for Forged in Fire. This is a show, after all, where Judge Doug Mercader happily proclaims that a weapon will kill when he's pleased with the test results.
It will kill.
But the show's focus on blades and their ability to cut through ballistic dummies and animal carcasses has had some police and parents groups in an uproar ever since its debut. For example, some British police organizations have criticized the show for glorifying bladed weaponry, worrying that it might be an especially bad influence on kids. This might be particularly true in the United Kingdom, where so-called knife crime has hit historic highs in recent years. According to The Guardian, crimes involving bladed weapons rose 7% in 2019, nearly 45,000 cases in just 12 months. Unsurprisingly, the History Channel dismisses such worries, noting there's no evidence of any link between the show and crime rates involving knives or otherwise. Bladesmithing has long been a male-dominated field, an issue that has caused the show some difficulties of its own. Forged in Fire has been criticized for the lack of female representation, especially since the host and judges are exclusively male. The entire first season failed to feature a single woman as a contestant during its run. It's not entirely the show's fault, of course. There are only 4 female master bladesmiths in the country after all, and Audrey Draper became the first female master bladesmith just 20 years ago. The show has made a real effort to increase the number of female smiths, however. Producer Tim Healy explained that in season 1, it was hard enough to find any bladesmiths willing to come on the show because it wasn't at all known to the general public. Since then, the show has managed to have several female smiths on, and a few have even won their episode and walked away with their $10,000 prize.
Antiques Roadshow is the popular PBS program that reveals the secret history and value of rare and interesting objects. But what is it really like to be on the show? How do the appraisers know so much? Keep watching to learn the untold truth of Antiques Roadshow. Antiques Roadshow's website explains that the vast majority of antiques on the show are usually valued at under $500. Still, there are those moments when something is actually worth quite a bit more. One man in Tulsa, Oklahoma brought a collection of cups made from rhinoceros' horns to the show in 2011. It turned out that the 5 cups had been carved in the 1700s and were once used as drinking cups. The collection was valued at between $1 million and $1.5 million and remains one of the most valuable items ever seen on the show. Then there was a man who, in 2004, brought a family heirloom to the show. It was described as a Swiss Patek Philippe pocket watch. All the owner knew was that it belonged to his grandfather back in 1914 and had been passed down through the family. The watch came complete with the original box, warranty, and even spare parts, and was obviously well taken care of. The owner had also had it appraised and knew it was worth at least $6,000. Imagine his surprise when Antiques Roadshow valued the watch at $250,000. But it gets even better. 2 years later, the pocket watch sold at Sotheby's for $1,541,212. Today, that same watch is worth between $2 million and $3 million. Some strange stuff does occasionally appear on Antiques Roadshow. In March 2020, what looked like a large varnished nut appeared on the show. The object brought a lot of comments and laughs, mostly because it sort of resembled a big derriere. The nut was ultimately identified as a coco de mer from the Seychelles Islands, which are located far off the east coast of Africa and the western Indian Ocean. The nuts were originally believed to be from mythical trees below the ocean until their origins were finally identified in 1768. According to antique expert Mark Allam, it's hand-finished as well. It's essentially a huge seed pod, a sort of double coconut. Another oddball piece was a simple Monopoly game. What made it unique was that after a group of thieves committed England's Great Train Robbery in 1963, the gang played the game using real cash at a hideout. Authorities on the gang's trail found the game and were able to identify the robbers from their fingerprints on the board. Several men were convicted of the robbery, but the true mastermind of the operation was not revealed until 2014. Appraiser George Archdale said this about the board's value.
It's possible to say perhaps it's £100 to £200 of someone's money, but would it be right for people to profit from crime?
Antiques Roadshow's so-called experts messed up following the very first season of the show in 1996. Appraiser Russ Pritchard valued an antique sword at $35,000. The Boston Herald called foul, and producers discovered that Pritchard and alleged sword owner Stephen Sadler were high school buddies and staged the appraisal. Sadler didn't even own the sword. The episode was pulled, but Pritchard and another cohort, George Juno, were contacted by descendants of Major Samuel J. Wilson who had seen the show. The men appraised Wilson's Civil War sword at nearly $8,000 and bought it for display in the National Civil War Museum in Pennsylvania. Instead, however, the men coordinated the sale of the sword for $20,000. Pritchard eventually went to jail. These days, Antiques Roadshow makes sure to keep an updated list of appraisers on their website, but there's always a chance that even a professional might make a mistake. Some years back, appraiser Stephen Fletcher identified an odd-looking jug as late 19th century. He compared it to Pablo Picasso and valued the item between $30,000 and $50,000. However, a fan of the show recognized the work and confirmed that the jug was made in high school circa 1973. Antique Roadshow's bona fide experts are usually good at spotting fakes, but a few get by them, such as a hand-painted box by early Pennsylvania folk artist Jacob Weber. In 2016, the show's website confirmed that appraiser Wes Cowan incorrectly assessed the item as an authentic antique. Antique dealer Patrick Bell set the record straight, explaining that the box's hasp, hinges, wood bottom, and paint indicated the trinket was probably a fake. Antiques Roadshow corrected the error, reporting the outcome and admitting that even so-called experts can be fooled. Still, the antique box received an appraised value of between $100 and $150, not bad for some early American folk art. Fraudulent watches are especially prone to duping innocent buyers. On an episode of Antiques Roadshow's British version, watch expert Richard Price made it clear that fake watches have increasingly become harder to spot, and that sophisticated fakes can test even experts. The trick is to check out the movements, or such telltale signs like peeling gold plating, fake hallmarks which mark the purity of the item, and even the watch's weight can signify it isn't real. This is best checked by a specialist or professional jeweler. Jewelry is another problem area, according to appraiser Joyce Jones. The market is ripe for rip-off replicas of such well-known brands as Coco Chanel, Christian Dior, and Elsa Schiaparelli especially. Some items are forbidden to bring to Antiques Roadshow. Ivory is one of them. It's not that it's necessarily illegal to own antique ivory in its various forms, but rather that our government almost completely banned commercial trade in 2016 because the ivory trade continues to encourage poaching. The 2016 directive was actually a follow-up to the Endangered Species Act of 1973, which required permission from the Secretary of the Interior or the Secretary of Commerce. And although ivory is commonly seen at many estates and yard sales, Antiques Roadshow would rather not deal with its sensitive nature. Another touchy area is Native American artifacts. Antiques Roadshow explains that laws governing ownership of such things make it a complicated field. In 2013, a woman brought an Anasazi pot to the show, which was valued between $3,000 and $4,000. But the item raised a question as to whether it was legal for the lady to own it. In 1990, according to the National Park Service, the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act made it illegal to collect native artifacts. But that has not stopped people from doing it anyway. Every person lucky enough to get into an Antiques Roadshow event is guaranteed a free appraisal, but there is no guarantee you will actually appear on the show. The reason is that at an average of 2,500 attendees with 2 items per show, upwards of 5,000 objects could possibly be appraised. The key to actually scoring an on-camera appraisal is to bring something truly unique with a great story behind it. Even something with a high appraisal might be passed up for something else with an intriguing history and provenance. Here's how it works. Appraisers view each item at the event and alert producers if it's something show-worthy. From there, the owner of the interesting find waits in line. Eventually, they will be sorted into other lines depending on what category their particular item falls into. After more waiting, the staff will shuffle them onto the set and into another line to meet with an appraiser. If the appraiser thinks the item is special enough, they tell another producer, who then decides whether to air the appraisal.
Shove something in a box that turns out to be a pretty valuable item. So who knows? Who knows?
Bear in mind, if an owner of an interesting object gets this far and the item is a hit, they will be sure to act very, very surprised.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
No appraisal is official since those in the business actually use 3 methods to assess the value of an item: auction, retail, and insurance. The auction value is basically set by the buyer, although someone buying for a highly desirable item might bid far more than the item's retail value. Appraiser and auctioneer Carrie Shrive says, "This is why the most valuable items are often sold at auction. It's often the best way to realize maximum value for a rare object." On the retail side of things, dealers pay less than an item's worth in order to make money when they sell it, and that can result in setting the price higher for a bigger profit. That leads to the insured value, which insurance companies set at the top end of retail value, just enough for the owner to buy a replacement.
The partial team signed 1930 Braves ball. I'd put the value on that one for insurance purposes at about $1,000.
Indeed, any appraisal on Antiques Roadshow is basically approximate, although the appraisers do have time to research the item at hand using computers, libraries, sales comparisons, and what is known about the item's history. If the item is a really big deal, the producers and appraisers likely know about it before it's even brought to the show. And since appraisers are not paid, giving accurate values can give them needed exposure to draw more business. If an item turns out to be extremely valuable, Antiques Roadshow does keep security guards around, and police are on hand to escort those with high-dollar items to their car. The official rules assure attendees that Antiques Roadshow hires private security and the police to monitor events. Additionally, all guests who enter an event are subject to searches, and the show's producers can deny entry to anyone for any reason. But securing the area goes much further than just hiring guards and notifying police. In her 2009 book, Antiques Roadshow Behind the Scenes, an insider's guide to PBS's #1 weekly show, author Marcia Bemko wrote about security director Sean Quinn. The security director personally visited each town ahead of the show to make recommendations and develop a security plan. Volunteers working for the show are trained and cautioned to call a supervisor in security should they see something amiss. Attendees are limited to 2 items per ticket, but an item can be a collection. Even so, the items should be as closely related as possible. There are, however, certain items that the show will not appraise. These include ammunition or explosives, bicycles, cars, coins, fossils, paper currency, stamps, or stock certificates. In the interest of safety, antique glass fire extinguishers are prohibited too. These round glass collectibles were filled with either salt water or a chemical, carbon tetrachloride, the latter of which can be dangerous if the fragile bulb is broken. Notably, weapons are also prohibited under certain circumstances. All knives and swords must be in a sheath or wrapped to prevent injury. All firearms have to be unloaded, and even if it is an antique, bringing a gun is still subject to local, state, and federal laws. It is also important to remember that anyone entering the area can be searched if they appear suspicious. It isn't easy to get on Antiques Roadshow, although there are 4 ways to score tickets. One of them is a sweepstakes, wherein entrants access the show's websites with a valid email address and fill out an electronic form in its entirety. The second sweepstakes requires participants to follow Antiques Roadshow on Twitter or Instagram with their own account and type in a comment, which tags a friend or includes the name of the city where the appraisal event is taking place. Then there's the Knock Our Socks Off contest. In this, entrants have to submit an online entry form at a different site. The submission must include a description of the potential item in 20 words or less and a story about the item in 200 words or less. Owners also have to submit at least one photo of the item, and it has to comply with specific upload criteria. And the item must fit into a category on a drop-down list. Last is the furniture contest, wherein those wanting to lug their antique rocker or other large piece of furniture must enter the first sweepstakes contest, live within 60 miles of the event, submit an entry form, include a photo, and agree to let the show staff transport the item to and from the event and use it on the show.